Our expert committee on the safety of medicines, the Pharmacovigilance and Risk Assessment Committee, has now come to a conclusion on the review of cases of blood clots in people vaccinated with AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine. The committee has come to a clear scientific conclusion. This is a safe and effective vaccine. The reported cases of unusual blood clotting following vaccination with the AstraZeneca vaccine should be listed as possible side effects of the vaccine.
What's up, North Carolina? All you Liberty lovers out there, welcome back to another incredible episode of Liberty Inc., your source for all things Liberty in our great Tar Heel state. Got another wonderful episode. Of course, you should expect nothing less from us at this point. This week, we have, as our featured guests, your governor and lieutenant governor candidates, Mike Ross and Shannon Bray, come on to talk for a while about all the things they want to do, policy priorities, campaign strategies. We get real in-depth, wonderful conversation. We don't even get halfway through the stuff we wanted to talk about, so we will be bringing them back, but I highly recommend it. For that, we have one of our good friends of the LPNC, Dr. Dan Eichenbaum, giving us a little testament to the importance of the Second Amendment and how it protects us from tyranny. And then we have a video from one of our presidential nominees, candidates, potential nominees, Charles Ballay, who has sent it along special for North Carolina. And then, as always, Dub and Groo Talk Sports. Appreciate y'all watching. Remember to hit like and subscribe to this channel, whether you're watching on YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, Google Pods. I don't know where else it's on, to be honest. It's automatic at this point, and I'm failing at my job. But yeah, communications@lpnc.org. Questions, comments, hate mail, whatever it may be, other feedback. Otherwise, enjoy.
The following video podcast is a presentation of Dr. Dan's Freedom Forum.
The Second Amendment, constitutional guarantor of individual freedom. Firearms in the hands of individual citizens represent the greatest single threat to tyrants, and they know it. It's not as if all this hasn't happened before. From the dawn of human civilization, groups of men have sought to rule over others. The result is always the same: a struggle to prevent tyrants from eliminating individual freedom. In 1935, Adolf Hitler and the Progressive Weimar Republic enacted universal gun registration laws. Hitler proclaimed, "This year will go down in history. For the first time, a civilized nation has full gun registration. Our streets will be safer, our police more efficient, and the world will follow our lead into the future." Shortly thereafter, Dr. Werner Best, the Gestapo's second-in-command, wrote, "As a rule, we have to assume that firearms in the hands of the Jews represent a considerable danger for the German people." Confiscation of guns from Jews, other targeted groups, and dissidents quickly followed. Between 1939 and 1945, 13 million Jews, gypsies, and other undesirables, disarmed and unable to defend themselves, were arrested and exterminated. Disarming citizens has always been a prelude to slaughter, as proven by the fate of the Jews in Hitler's Germany, political dissidents in Stalin's Russia and Mao's China, the educated in Pol Pot's Cambodia, the Armenians in Turkey, and the Christians in Uganda, to name just a few. Well over 100 million dead innocents bear silent witness to the inevitable consequences of disarming individual citizens. It is the ultimate irony that we can use a quote from Adolf Hitler, one of history's most infamous mass murderers, to affirm without doubt the risk to individual freedom posed by gun registration and selective gun confiscation. Suppose we rewrite Dr. Best's statement in a generic form. As a rule, we have to assume that firearms in the hands of blank represent a considerable danger for blank. Once the concept of selective enforcement of gun laws is established, specific groups of people can be targeted and their guns confiscated. As a rule, we have to assume that firearms in the hands of the insane represent a considerable danger for the American people. As a rule, we have to assume that firearms in the hands of Iraq war veterans represent a considerable danger for the American people. How about veterans who have ever had PTSD? Or anyone who has ever seen a psychiatrist? Or anyone who has ever taken prescription medications like Prozac? Or, as a rule, we have to assume that firearms in the hands of political protesters represent a considerable danger for the American people. It should be obvious how any repressive regime can easily use laws for the registration and confiscation of firearms as a means to control and enslave its people. In fact, totalitarian governments commonly use legislation and regulation to make all citizens criminals. Those laws, once in place, can be selectively enforced against any dissidents or undesirables who are considered a threat to the ruling class. Don't tell me that it cannot happen here in America. It already has in the past and continues to occur on a daily basis. Selective enforcement of speed limit laws is a good example. Most of us exceed the speed limit on a daily basis, but few are stopped and ticketed. Police use arbitrary criteria to determine which vehicles get pulled over, and that's when the fun begins. Aggressive officers, expecting answers to questions they have no right to ask, may also demand permission to search your vehicle, which can turn a minor offense into a Kafkaesque nightmare of serious legal difficulties. In 1942, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, one executive order from FDR led to the incarceration without habeas corpus of 110,000 American citizens of Japanese descent in what we would now call FEMA camps. More recently, when martial law was declared in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, members of the police and National Guard violently abused the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens by forcing them out of their undamaged homes and illegally confiscating their weapons.
Yeah, no one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
Residents were bullied, harassed, beaten, and left without means to defend themselves. Was this law enforcement acting to protect and serve citizens in need of assistance? Not at all. It was an arrogant usurpation of power that should serve as a warning to all of us. Videos, photographs, and eyewitness accounts are now surfacing of similar actions taken by militarized police units and agents of the federal government after the terrorist bombings in Boston. Heavily armed Boston police and Homeland Security personnel were captured on video, demanding entry into private homes, forcibly removing occupants, and searching the empty dwellings, all without provocation, valid reason, or search warrants. If one makes slight adjustments to the uniforms and weapons, these photographs could easily have been taken in 1938, inside Nazi Germany, when jackbooted SS thugs arrested and slaughtered millions of innocent citizens. The Holocaust happened to people just like each of us, people who just couldn't bring themselves to believe that their so-called civilized government would be capable of perpetrating war crimes and genocide against its own citizens. while the Nazis enacted restrictive laws, encouraged violence against Jews and dissidents, and confiscated their means of personal protection, these future victims falsely reassured themselves that the history and highly developed culture of the German people would prevent the atrocities and extermination that subsequently occurred. It is an undeniable fact of history. Universal gun registration leads to selective gun confiscation, which leads to the slaughter of targeted innocents who are unable to protect themselves from an armed totalitarian government. Having just thrown off the yoke of tyranny, our founders understood that the citizens of our new nation should always retain the right to prevent the rise of any future tyranny and have the means to do so. The Constitution and Bill of Rights strictly limit the powers of the central government while reserving for the states and the people of the states the authority to restrain and punish the federal government when it oversteps its constitutional limits. The meaning and purpose of the Second Amendment is clear and unambiguous. Its four most important words, "shall not be infringed," are limited only by the period at the end, which was intended to prevent the addition of arbitrary conditions and restrictions. George Washington said, "A free people ought not only to be armed and trained, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government." And Thomas Jefferson said, "The strongest reason for the people to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against tyranny and government." So, can a well-armed citizenry truly be a deterrent to tyranny? Ask the British. It took only 3% of the American colonists to defeat the most powerful military force on Earth. After their successful attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese did not attack the U.S. mainland. Admiral Yamamoto is purported to have said, "You cannot invade the mainland United States. There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass." There are over 100 million gun owners in the United States. If we assume the colonial participation rate of 3%, that 3 million citizens would constitute the largest armed militia on planet Earth. No wonder they want to disarm us. By including the Second Amendment in the Bill of Rights our founders gave us, we the people, the means to prevent the rise of a tyrannical central government, just like the British monarchy, against which they had successfully rebelled, as well as the current version of the federal government and its bloated bureaucracy that has far exceeded the constitutionally enumerated powers delineated in Article 1, Section 8. Our collective ignorance of history and a willful disregard for its lessons has brought our divided nation to that fork in the road at which we must choose, once again, between tyranny and freedom.
Hello, North Carolina. My name is Charlie Balley, and first, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the North Carolina Libertarian Party for allowing me to speak via Zoom since I'm unable to attend the convention. So I'm coming to you tonight from my native hometown in New Orleans, Louisiana, where we are in the midst of Mardi Gras season. And most importantly, North Carolina, I'm here to speak to you on my run for candidacy as President of the United States as a Libertarian. There comes a time when the call for extraordinary action compels us to rise above the ordinary, and so as this election in 2024 approaches, I, Charles Balley, am answering that call. And so tonight I humbly stand before you not merely as a politician, but as a man driven by a profound duty to challenge the status quo and advocate for those who do not have a voice. So who am I? I'm an ear, nose, and throat physician with roots in a small community in southern Louisiana. My journey in medicine has taken me across this wonderful United States. My upbringing in a low-income, hard-working family destined me for success. They instilled in me the values of hard work, education, and self-reliance. These are principles that have defined the libertarian ethos. The current political landscape is dominated by career politicians from both the Democrats, if not the Republican parties, and these persons have neglected the most vulnerable. Witnessing this, I am compelled to step forward. My medical career has been about helping others to this day, and now I aim to extend that help on a much broader scale to ensure that our government is held accountable to its people and not simply sold to the highest bidder. Our nation's freedoms demanded by our founding forefathers are currently being eroded. We have watched as our societal values have plummeted and as economic disparities have widened. This has created a divide that weakens our nation. That is not the America we strive for, and as a libertarian, I am committed to reinstating the values of freedom, individual rights, and personal autonomy, as well as family values. And so 2024 is not just another election year. It's a pivotal moment in our history. It's a year that demands change and unity of our party. And so I stand here simply a man from southern Louisiana asking humbly for your support and vote, and not just for my candidacy, but for the common cause of our party. Now, together we face a duopoly of well-entrenched parties that seek to maintain control and control at all costs. But I see their system not as a well-oiled machine as many would have it, but as one that's plagued by self-interest, leaving the American people burdened with debt and disillusionment. And so it's a time for change and for a leader who represents the people, distanced from the political elite circles, and dedicated solely to the well-being of this wonderful nation. And so, in this presidential election under the leadership of the Libertarian Party, and with the unity and support of members like you in North Carolina, we can all bring a fresh perspective to the White House. We can attract those from other parties who share our vision, a vision that is not new, but as old as this wonderful nation itself, rooted in the values that define our independence. And so I humbly ask for your consideration, not simply as a candidate, but as a fellow American committed to liberty, responsibility, and compassion. Together we can restore our nation to its founding principles and ensure a future where every single American has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you very much, North Carolina, and God bless America. Ballet for President in 2024.
Hello, what's up, Liberty lovers of North Carolina and everyone else who is tuning in. Welcome back. We are here with our guests for Season 4, Episode 4 of Liberty Inc. I'm really excited to introduce to the people of North Carolina and the world, for the first time as a married couple. For the first time, though, for real, officially, as our governor and lieutenant governor candidates, Mike Ross and Shannon Bray. How y'all doing today?
Good, man.
Well. So I'm going to do something here that is sort of unusual in politics, and I'm actually going to ask you all about the issues. Not going to try and play some game of like bash the other guy and make your neighbor hate each other. And
so should we be politicians and just avoid talking about them and ignore everything you have to say and just spit out some nonsense? Is that what you're looking for?
I mean, the other two did everything they could to avoid debating their primary opponents. And I know that sounds like politician bashing, but my frustration with that is if you have better ideas, then bring your better ideas. Like if you really think you have the better idea, you shouldn't have to go after the other person, and you should be very well capable of defending that idea against your primary opponent and why you're the better candidate. And that should be that. it's one thing Dale Falwell says that it just resonates with me so much. It's a job interview. So like if you're ducking the interview, why should the people hire you?
I think probably they're counting on the nepotism, right? That daddy federal government's going to install them.
And
Well, they're not far off, right? I mean, one's gotten the nod from Trump, the other one's got the nod from Biden, right? So they're just expecting that their base is going to pick them based off the letters next to their name, as opposed to what value they're actually going to add.
Yeah.
and that's the unfortunate truth. And I think, I mean, it's easy to go after Stein and Robinson in this situation. And I think they just picked the Republican lieutenant governor. I think primary is just announced. I'll drop a name on the screen when I'm certain of it, because I wasn't sure if it was official yet. But
it looks like it's out of contention at this point.
is it?
So,
okay.
yeah.
But what you all do, and what they're not held to account because of this, is you stand by the issues you promote. And so one of the big ones that we've been talking about is something that I think 39 other states have enacted now, making us way behind. And Shannon, I want to start with you because I saw you tweeting about this. You said in office, if libertarians take the governor's mansion, one of your top priorities will be constitutional carry. Why is this important?
Yeah, I think it's been long overdue. I mean, we've had Robinson as our lieutenant governor for a while. And, the lieutenant governor doesn't really get to dictate a lot of the policy. Like the governor can come in and power of the pardon and stuff, but he's still the leader of the Senate, right? So he could be trying to push constitutional carry. He's preached about it, but yet he doesn't show up to the events. It's more of it's just a talking point to him as opposed to something that he actually cares about. I mean, he's called out all the time on social media, never responds. Leaders of the grassroots communities and things like that are constantly just, asking what his position is. And there's a lot of Republicans out there who are voting for him only because they're not taking away the guns. Like, one's going to take away your guns and one won't. Well, that's not what we're looking at here. We should be focused on the actual Second Amendment, right? Focusing on making sure that everyone has the right to bear arms and to protect themselves, as opposed to not taking away my guns. While it's true that some of those policies may do that, we should be looking to expand on that. And I would hope that any of our Republican nominees should be on the same page as Mike and I, but we found that they're not. There's a lot of people.
Their voters are
scared. The voters are, yes, but the candidates themselves are too scared to put anything out there because they don't want to be, framed in a certain way. Where, as libertarians, we speak our truth. Our truth doesn't change. We don't care what crowd we're speaking to. We don't change what we say. And unfortunately, that's just not what we see in the political arena now.
Yeah.
I think that's spot on. Sometimes I think we almost do too good of a job of saying exactly what we think without making it very clear that a big part of everything we think is and you have every right to think what you want to, and I'm never going to agree, but I will defend your right to think that with everything that I have. So you don't hear a lot of the game playing. Then you see the games being played. And we say the uniparty, yeah, sure, there are some things that you are going to get with one, less likely with the other, but they're all playing the games. They all have people that give them a whole lot of money in a whole lot of different ways to get their bills passed. But we put our money where our mouths is and where our mouths are. So to speak. And Mike, I know you were just up in Raleigh trying to get House Bill 189 passed in the short session. If you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's why I say, Mark Robinson, just like Shannon was saying, Mark Robinson, he got his start with a pro 2A speech in front of the Greensboro or city council. And you would think that while the Republicans have a supermajority, right, a veto-proof supermajority, that's the time to really stand for what your base wants, especially if it's something as basic as enshrining the fundamental right that's given, natural right that's given to us, enshrined in our Constitution. And when it came down to it, I saw grassroots NC, which is, I would argue probably mostly Republican voters that are a part of that organization. And they were putting in a call to take it to Senator Berger and say, look, you said that there was not a need for gun control, for another gun bill. And Paul Vallone, their president, said, are you the arbiter of needs, or is this a constitutional right? Right. So, I mean, so I was there, and, there were some other libertarians that joined the grassroots effort, and grassroots dropped off around 7,000 signatures on a hand truck to Senator Berger's office. And then we split out into teams and went around to the entire, Republican House, right? You claim your party is a pro-2A party, right? You claim it. That's what you tell voters, mostly Republicans here. And what you see is, we're still fighting for it. We're still waiting for House Bill 189.
They also say they're in for small government, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things Republicans say, that I argue is, I laugh and I say it a lot, but Republicans, at least in practice, seem to campaign like libertarians and then govern like Democrats. I mean, they say they're for small government, yet, we have warrantless spying. We have, situation where our own state house and state senate can classify their own documents, so the people of North Carolina can't do that. Like, that's the small government Republicans, basically saying that we're not even going to let you see documents that you're paying for the creation of. It's kind of wild.
You both hit the nail on the head. So think about just sort of how deeply dangerous that comment is. We didn't see the need for it.
Wild.
Now, on the surface level, if someone was like, well, why didn't you pass a bill regarding what the national or the state color of carrots is, or something and I'm something deliberately ridiculous.
Right.
Obviously, we can see there's no need for the bill. Even in that case, if the people bring the bill up, if the people ask for the bill, your responsibility is not to make a determination as to what is required. Your responsibility is to address the bill and put your position out. But when you say we didn't see a need for it, and you're talking about a fundamental right, a natural right enshrined in the Constitution, and then Shannon, you immediately said it, and they say they're this party of small government, and Mike, you followed up, and it's so true. It's like with the Democrats, we know what their position is. Government can fix things. Now, I disagree with it, and further, I would argue that it's been proven wrong. Every single situation it's been tried. At best, you get trade-offs that cost people a lot more money. But the Republicans are supposed to be the party of small government. They want to talk to the libertarians like, hey, we're buddies. And it's like, you did what you said, we could hang out more, but you're all the opposite. You're the party of small government, and then you're selling out to donors and enforcing your morality through government. If you have the superior morality, the superior ideas, just put them out there. People will go for it.
I mean, you guys are both a little older than me, right? I think you guys are both a little bit older than me. I'm 41. I don't think I've seen evidence of Republicans shrinking government in my lifetime. Maybe they used to in your lifetime. I don't know, but
the last person I remember shrinking government was actually Bill Clinton, when I was I was active duty military at the time, right? And they started shutting down bases. But he balanced that budget. I haven't seen anything aggressive from any Republican that would even amount to the same. He was closer to the libertarian truth there than the Republicans, and that's not typically what we see.
Yeah, and I would argue even when they're shrinking, spending in certain places, it's rare that Republicans or Democrats are ever shrinking power. Like I've never seen a politician say, "Hey, wait, maybe we shouldn't have this power," and work to undo it. It's always grab more power. Whether it's a crime bill, whether it's, anything else, there's, you maybe get a little bit of government shrinking in one area, but overall, probably, I think government.
Well, growth. I mean, they give us taxes, right, for government programs. And even if that government program fails, the taxes still remain.
Yeah.
So they never come back and say, hey, you know what? That didn't really work out. Thank you for helping us pay for it. We're going ahead and going to reduce your taxes now. And maybe you can spend your money on something similar to kind of help the cause, but that'll never happen.
You asked, can we think of a time the Republicans have shrunk government? And I shouldn't say it hasn't happened, because I'm sure there's other state examples that I don't know of I mean, I'm not sure, but I would at least, I don't want to say that I can't think of any example because it's never happened, but in North Carolina and at the federal level, the best things I can think of are a few cases where they were willing to cut the budget, but then not even go out and say what programs they want to cut in conjunction with it. So it's like you're giving these talking points like, yeah, we're going to cut government, we're going to slash spending. Okay, how? Because that's a really important thing.
As much as they say it, you would think we would have lots of examples, right? I mean, they seem to pretend like it's party identity, that they're the party of small government, which is a libertarian. I think we can all kind of laugh at that. The idea that they're a party of small government, because
one place I feel like Republicans do cut spending and don't offer an alternative plan. And I think you all have some really good ideas on this, and it's been talked about a bunch before, but it's education.
Yeah.
And it's the place where, I don't know, it just seems the simplest for them to be like, nope, let's just take money from education. We're not going to cut education. We're going to push programs that are still government mandated that don't work, but we're going to take money from kids. And I will say this, against all taxes, but if we got to have taxes and it's going to education and it's actually educating children, I'm happiest with that outcome of all the possible outcomes. But they want to cut education spending still sort of indiscriminately. I do feel like some of it's targeted, like they think there's a Democrat donor and voter base in the ranks of education, the teachers unions. Why is it, from both of you, more broadly, that we have an education system that's just getting worse and worse? And is it failing yet? Maybe that's hyperbolic, but it's trending down and has consistently. And yet both parties just point fingers at the other and no one seems to be able to do anything to fix it.
Well, the only way that they're trying to fix it now is by throwing more money at it. We are one of the states with, we spend more money in education, while when you actually look at our education system, we're well under par. The money that we're spending is not formulating into good education. So we need to find a way to help improve that. And one of the things that the Republicans have gotten very close to, more on the libertarian aspect, I believe, I'm not 100% on their school choice, but I like to champion it because it is very similar. We can use it to get to a more libertarian style. But as the funding is following a student, then we make sure that student, whether they choose one school or another, they're going to have that funding. And where that's important is, and by all rights, parents they're invested in their children's education, and they want to make sure that what their children are learning is both in line with their beliefs, and also kind of in line with how education's always kind of been. And it just it's veering off. We should really be, education has never been on point. We're not teaching our students anything financially, right? You can graduate from high school and not have a clue how a credit card works, but yet as soon as you graduate, you get one, and now you're in debt. So it's, we should be teaching life skills as opposed to some of the other things that that people deem necessary in today's world.
That's one of my concerns, if I'm being honest, Shannon, and one of the ways that, when we were primary opponents, right, I think we kind of had pretty drastic thoughts on education, and that kind of hits on one of my challenges that I push back against the Republicans, because the name school choice, I think, by far more accurately represents my plan, because it actually increases school choice. And I would argue that the way that the Republicans are doing it, especially if you look at it in the long run, is actually providing less school choice, which I know seems counterintuitive, right? But right now, everyone has at least some degree of school choice, right? You can send your kid to a government school. You can make the changes in your life that allow you to homeschool your kid. If you have the money, you can send them to a private school. You have these choices. But ultimately, of those choices, you have government school, homeschool, non-government school. And what I'm afraid that's going to happen with the way the Republicans are pushing this ESA program is they're essentially going to make it so that you still have homeschool. At least I don't think there's anything in there that'll like prevent you from homeschooling, but you're going to have government school and government school light when all of these private schools are now bowing to whatever they want to turn on kind of the faucet of government money. And I look at it and say, you know, we do have a constitutional requirement in the state of North Carolina to provide for an education. But the idea that we should be central planning that, and that's something that I'm just so vehemently against, the idea that we can centrally plan it and that some board at the federal level or even some board at the, you know, the state or even county level can account for the needs of the students in their area is just, in my opinion, antithetical to what the market says it should be, right? If I wish I could get the government entirely out of education, but our Constitution doesn't do that. So I really thought if we have to give real school choice, get the government out of everything except for actually funding it at this point, right? Until we can amend the Constitution and, you know, change something different with the consent of the people of this state, I think we should not have the government planning the education lessons, not having the government really involved in anything other than, you know, essentially being a middleman until we don't need them to do that anymore. Because I think if you let parents ultimately make those choices, you know, the market suggests, at least from how I've observed markets, you know, globally, if you allow the markets to create innovative solutions, you're going to get better results. And the sad result of the current status quo is that by and large, the government has a monopoly on education. And if we don't break that monopoly, every teacher, every student, every stakeholder, even the taxpayers, is going to be forced into this failing monopoly. And, you know, Rob, I know you kind of said it, is it hyperbole to say it's failing? I don't know. I sat through a presentation, Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools, right? That's your county. I'm one county over. I think we're a little bit better on some of these metrics, but they were looking at like preparedness and at being on grade level for math in the 9th grade. And it was something like 5% proficiency in certain districts among certain places. And their goal was to get it to 25%. Like if that's your goal, is to get to a point where 3 out of 4 students are still failing, like your whole system has failed already. Like how is it not?
CMS
75
is failing without a doubt. I mean,
how do you say it's not failing? Like when that's the reality. Even if you reach this goal, 25% of students are proficient in math, and you're going to pat yourself on the back for that. Because here's what I know: if you put those dollars up for the free market, one, class sizes will shrink because teachers will have a much better opportunity to pull that value as the actual service provider, right? Because that's who provides the education, right? Is the teachers. And sadly, you know, it's not the district administrator, right? The district administrator is not providing any real value to the students. And if those dollars were being run by the market, I think some of those bloated jobs with the government that don't actually benefit education, where we see in many cases salaries, you know, some of the salaries that are public salaries, some of the highest are in education, right? They're making more than you know, the scientists in many cases, the legislators, and every dollar that's going into bloat is inefficiency in the market. And if you just envision, you know, what micro schools would look like, what a teacher could look like if they said, hey, I only need to take 10 students and I can really pour myself into those students. It's just, to me, it seems so common sense that if you align the economic incentives better, that the outcome will be better. And the idea of trying to centrally plan that is silly. Just align the economic incentives where the only thing that's going to drive desire to get education is how good the education is. We'll attract the best teachers in the world. They'll be some of the highest paid teachers in the world. And I would argue if we have that, you know, we're going to have the best education, at least in the country. And you know, the only downside is there's probably going to be a lot of do nothing state employees that that don't have jobs anymore. And I wish them very much luck doing something that's hopefully a little more productive.
Think about, just like as a thought experiment. So starting off, what would constitute a failing education system? And I don't know that I have the answer to that. I think you can make a very strong case that it's failing. I think you could make a very strong case that it is.
What's the single most important thing that an education should do? What both of you guys think?
So that's actually the point I was going to get at. because if we ask if it's failing, we have to say, what do we want it to do? For me, it's educate the children. And that's where CMS is failing. And we're seeing, I think, major fissures that existed before that were exposed or exacerbated through COVID. I personally would say it's failing. When I say be careful about being hyperbolic, I do think there's room to use the existing infrastructure, get the government out of it, and let the people drive. And I think some of the interesting things that could come from that are actually really positive for teachers. In particular, you have a new teacher come in, and I mean, look, teachers don't make that much money. They really don't. So they're coming in early on because they love what they do. And that doesn't mean all teachers are, that we should necessarily give deference to all teachers as being caring or good. But let's assume that the mass of them are there to educate students. They're allowed to come in young at a school that is competing for dollars, so it has to be good, and then does things like mentorship programs and continued training that helps the school out, not the government mandated, like, go take another education seminar that we determine. And then I think you cut the rod out that goes all the way to the top. So like, we're looking at all this stuff where kids are protesting at colleges, and some people are like, that's great, and some people are like, that's awesome. And all I'm thinking is like, my tax dollars are funding this no matter what I think of it. Like, if you want your kid to go to a school where they protest, cool. And if you don't, cool. You should just be able to pay for it or not.
Yeah.
It's and then everything becomes a crisis too, right? Like, we have a student loan crisis, student debt crisis. No, we don't. We have a viable degree crisis. We don't have an education crisis. We have a government and education crisis.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the roots of the American education system, right? And the public school system coming out of the Prussian system. It was not designed, because where you say education, to me, that's too ambiguous for me, right? Because what's education to you and what's education to Shannon and what's education to me may be different. We're all libertarians, so we're probably pretty grounded and not too far off. But I mean, there's plenty of North Carolinians that may have a completely different definition of what education. So that's why I like to simplify it and say that the purpose of schooling, right? School, in that sense, in my opinion, is to prepare a young person to live in an adult world, right? Whether that is learning skills, whether they be specialized for the area that they're in, or anything else.
Have to pay back a credit card, like shit.
Yeah, just skills. Teach them to be prepared so that when they go off into the world as an adult, that they have some useful tools to be a contributing member of society, to take care of themselves and elevate themselves economically, like prepare them to be well-rounded human beings that are equipped to succeed in this world. Because that's where I think it's really, really failing, is you put all these metrics around it, and not every kid's going to be great in math, right? Like, not every kid's going to be great in English. And, to me, trying to force that and dictate top down all of these things that a one-size-fits-all education program means is just such a fool's errand. And you're going to get all of the bad outcomes that we're seeing, right? Where you have these tests where they're like, every single kid has to do X level in all of these different things. And what you have is these scenarios where teachers are basically either teaching to the test at the expense of the kids, failing the kids out, and all of these negative outcomes where in smaller classes, and I've really only seen this more like as I've started homeschooling, right? And really seeing and understanding, every kid is different. They all learn different. They have different interests. And I think this Prussian system is not designed to take the creativity, the talents of the kids. It's designed to put them in a box and get them to comply and be obedient, good citizens who listen to the narrative. And that was the model, the model that our education system was built off of. And I think it's failing, where you see videos all the time of like young people who are just, I don't want to be hyperbolic or too negative, but almost catastrophically unprepared to exist as adults in the real world. And to me, that's the biggest evidence of failure. If we had 90% of kids coming out of the public school system and they were doing okay, but you have, I saw one there, like it's silly to use these anecdotal things, but you see them and they resonate, where it was like this person who was probably in like their really early, young 20s, didn't understand how credit cards work, and they look at it and they're like, "Hey, I've got a $4,000 credit." Like,
Yeah.
no, you have like a credit limit that's there, and you put a bunch of money on it. You don't understand that now you're in debt. Like, I just don't understand how anybody could go through any type of education and not know how like the basics of exchange work, right? Like the basics of like going to the grocery store and what happens if this swipe this card. Oh, you mean that's debt? Like how does anybody not know that and think that whatever education they had prepared them to exist in this world? And maybe it did. It certainly didn't prepare them to succeed in it though, and it buys into the reality that they become trapped in debt. And to me, that's one of the most horrific things we can do. And then that's one of the big problems with government, right? Is we can make our own decisions and avoid debt and make good personal choices. But my kid's 12 and the federal government already has him $250,000 in debt. He didn't consent to that, right? Like there's no good decisions that he could have made in his first 12 years on this planet that, could have saved him from $250,000 in debt. How do you deal with that as a society? That's just something I always struggle when I try to see the good in the status quo. And I think the only good is that we've seen how much of a failure the status quo is in so many of these areas. And to me, that's a lesson, right? If we're looking at things as education, right? Education should teach us to think critically and look at the facts and think, right? Think critically about things that can improve that. And to me, it's really straightforward on education. The government's failing, and if you allow realignment and align those dollars with the interests of those communities, like I don't think that every kid in the state needs the same education, and I know that might be controversial to some people, but I think that every education, if the system's working properly, should almost be aligned to each student, right? There should be some option out there that if you're a parent and whatever education option is out there that you're currently in, if that's not working for your kid, you should be able to find something that works for the kid. Like, I don't think it's that radical. And if the money was aligned properly, what I know is that most education that you could possibly want for your kid, regardless of what you want for your kid, you could probably find a way to do it with $13,000 if you were in control of that $13,000, because the state's spending it one way or another. So.
Let me jump on that theme of finding the good.
Yeah.
So I think that you make a good point. Like, it's very hard to find the good when the system is broken or breaking, and even where you do see good, it's often in spite of or sort of one-off. You have a kid, you homeschool, we homeschool now, but Shannon, you have 3 kids in public school, right?
Yes.
So looking at it from the other end, so not systemically, but on the ground, what are some good things you see in North Carolina that like we could build on, and that you all could use your position as candidates to encourage and put a spotlight on, that lies in this counter to this narrative, like we need to raise taxes and pay people more because that's why education is failing?
I'm not really sure on the good. Yeah, I mean, I have I have 2 daughters that are in the Wake County public school system, and this has been a couple years ago. And but my youngest, when I found out she couldn't count change, she didn't know what a quarter and a nickel and a dime were. She never really even paid attention to them. We've gone to a digital world, and when I kind of found that, then I was like, sit down, and then I had to fix that. I had to fix the way she added. The everything that she couldn't understand, how I could look at a math problem and come up with an answer in my head, because they had made things so complicated for them. And then as I'm trying to teach them stuff, it's like, well, Dad, that's not the way the teacher is telling me how to do it. So then I have to go to the teacher and say, okay, well, teach me how you're teaching them. And then an hour later, I'm like, well, that was stupid. And I don't necessarily know who comes up with that, but I've spent, and I'm only a part-time dad. I split custody with their mom, and we have a great cohesive balance with the girls. But when it comes to and they're both smart kids, and they both have their own separate interests. In fact, they grow up under the same house. I don't know if there's like a country song, two-story house, talking about how two girls grew up under the same roof but lived completely different lives because of just their own personal experiences even under the same roof. So that fits so well with my daughters. But then education, as Mike said, education isn't a one size fits all. One of them learns better one way, one learns another. One's kind of more outgoing with cheerleading, the other one's kind of more into just her circle of friends and can care less about extracurricular activities. And they try to find balance outside of school on trying to find out what they want to do when they grow up. And I started teaching them several years ago about finances, also about digital currencies, crypto. They're not experts, but they understand the general mix of it. I mean, they understand, or at least they understand that we're spending way too much more money, and it has effects on the dollar. They don't necessarily understand exactly how all of that works, but I have taught them to kind of understand that the government just can't print money and get us out of it. I was on I don't know, Instagram or Twitter the other day, and there was this poor girl on there just saying, hey, we can solve all the world's problems if we just start printing more money. Why isn't everybody thinking of this? Let's just print. And I was like, that is probably I don't want to say that idea is stupid, because it probably resonates with half our children, right? They don't know how ignorant.
It's also reflective of the education system, right? Because under the current paradigm, it actually doesn't come across as a stupid idea. And she should be able to think critically and understand very quickly why we have the inflation going on that we do right now, so many of the other problems we're seeing that just come from printing money, and also why they've stopped printing money because they see how bad it's going to be. Like, Biden's very afraid of the inflationary, because then you also explain, like, well, inflation's declined a little bit. Yes, it has. One, that doesn't mean it stopped going up. It's just slowed down how it's going up. And two, you have to realize the Fed raised rates to slow inflation, essentially driving up unemployment. Like, that's the trade-off. We are going to deliberately put people out of work so that inflation slows down to cover up our other mistakes.
To be fair, even the raw inflation numbers are nonsense, man. They manipulate the things that are in there. You look at the most recent thing that they pulled out. They pulled coffee out of the inflation calculation, where, like, out of the CPI factor, and look what's happening to coffee prices, right? And are we to say that coffee is not a huge product that so many North Carolinians and Americans are using every day? Why are you pulling that out of the inflation calculation if it's something that regular North Carolinians and regular Americans are including in their daily budget? I'll tell you why, because when the prices go up, that inflation, when it factors into a real budget, actually shows that inflation's a lot worse than they want to pretend it is. And that's
how you gerrymander.
That's why we're going to gerrymander our inflation. And that's why, like, I take such a hard line against it, and why, I know as the gubernatorial candidate, maybe I shouldn't be so almost blunt about it, but I will happily say, and I'm sorry if it bothers anybody, I will happily say that if your solution is to just print and print and print and print and print money, that's a dumb idea. And I'll be very blunt about it. It's dumb. It shows that you don't understand how math works. You don't understand how economics works. And there is a 0.000% chance of it actually solving anything. And yes, I didn't round. That's the actual to the precise percent chance of it winning. And anybody who knows me knows I very rarely talk in always and never, but that will never, ever make anything better.
I was trying to think of a way that printing money could work the other day, and there's one. if we could get like one of those $1 trillion asteroids and bring it down without causing damage and introduce that much actual value, maybe you could print some money to back it up. You're still going to see less spending power per dollar relative to what it would have been. But I think that gets to the larger point of like what people don't get about printing money is like money is just a representation of value. When you have more money in the system, the value gets split up more. So this is a question I've been looking forward to asking you both, because I think that of all the things that you have an opportunity to make a difference at the top of the ticket together in North Carolina is the actual economics of North Carolina.
Yeah.
But you're facing strong headwinds, both from our current core economy and from federal decisions, which can be tough to get around. So what would you do to drive prosperity in North Carolina?
Oh, you mind if I start on this one, Shannon? I love this one, man. So when you look at it, right, our actual spending, right, total government spending per citizen, right, so per capita government spending in the state of North Carolina, we're actually better than most states in this country. You know, Texas is a little better, Florida is a little better. There's a few states that are better, but we're actually one of probably the top 10 states as far as actual spending, right? Total government spending per resident. So to me, that's kind of a good thing. And we have a surplus doing it that way, right? So when I look at that, the first thing I think through is, what are some of the taxes? Because as a libertarian, I'm very quick to say that all taxation is theft, because it is. Like on a fundamental level, it's just, I guess, what level of theft
It's literally theft.
is society, I guess, willing to accept. But right now, so some of the lowest hanging fruit, in my opinion, let's start with the grocery tax, right? Like at the end of the day, the idea that you have to pay a tax for basic sustenance required to live, right? Like I don't care who you are. What do we need? We need air, we need food, we need water, and we need shelter. They haven't figured out a way, I guess, yet to tax us on the air, but it seems like they've really covered food, water, and shelter pretty handily right now. So, I think that's a strong case that we are nothing but like tax slaves if we exist to do that. But yeah, I mean that's getting there in the air. But it's not just coming directly out of our checks or being directly paid when we go there. But I think the grocery tax is one that, like, from day one, we make a call, eliminate that one, because that's one that affects every North Carolinian. Like, do you eat? Great. How about you? How about we let you eat? With basic foods out there. I think we have a slew of fees that are basically taxes, right? Like you buy a new car, that new car is going to be good for 5 to 10 years, right? But you pay registration on it and your inspection on it and all of these things that are just adding up. And they're basically taxes. Like, you could call it something else, but you're giving money to the government for a service that you don't want or need. That's a tax. I don't care what you label it, with the whole Obamacare thing where they're like, oh, is it a fee or a tax? Who cares? It's all a tax. So is inflation, if we're being truly honest about it. But I think we need to start like getting rid of those, right? Get rid of the grocery tax, get rid of all of these fees that were charged at all levels, really just to exist and live as a human in North Carolina. I think if you do those, specifically the broad ones, right? Looking for things that are in our budget that are paid by every single North Carolinian, because then you're maximizing the impact. When you repeal those taxes, you're really maximizing the impact on being able to say, you know what, this is good across the board for everybody. I don't care if you're rich, I don't care if you're poor, I don't care if you're somewhere in between. We are doing away with this tax on a fundamental level because it's the right thing to do, and that it's, I would argue, immoral to tax you to live. Right, like to tax you for the privilege of eating. If we don't start with the taxes at the luxury restaurants, I'm against all the taxes, but let's start with these low hanging fruits that affect all North Carolinians before we start getting into the specialized ones where it's just a handful or a group that does that, right? And ultimately, I think in addition to slashing taxes, right, we need to really get rid of some of the regulations that. Regulatory capture is real. And when we look what's happened coming out of COVID, not only across our country, but across our state, right? Like if you were here in North Carolina when COVID was going on and you looked around your communities, I'm sure you saw this, right? This massive movement of the economy from small businesses to large corporations, where they're telling your local mom and pop shop that they had to shut down, that they weren't allowed to open their business, but somehow Walmart was essential. Despite the fact that they were one of Walmart's competitors who's already struggling because they don't have the economies of scale, with cheap factories in foreign countries and like all of these things. So when you see that, I think we need to do away with all of the favoritism in the economy and truly embrace radical deregulation and radical reduction in taxes that affect taxes, fees, any of these things that affect everybody. And if you do that and get the government out of it, I think that ultimately we will see prosperity beyond anything that Republicans or Democrats could have even imagined as far as growth goes. And it's just a matter of getting the government out of the way. Because right now, all regulation really does, and especially when you look at how these regulations come to exist, a lot of them is designed with regulatory capture in mind. They are designed by these corporations that pay millions of dollars to lobbyists to write these laws, specifically because they plan on exploiting those laws, whether it be to shut down competition, whether it be to gain an unfair advantage. You don't spend $20 million creating a law just because you think it's the right thing to do, especially if you're a public company that's accountable to shareholders. You do it because you think you're going to get an ROI. And I think that the reality is we don't need the government to be determining anybody's ROI. We need those risk decisions and those market forces to determine that. If you do that, one, it'll create a situation where you have small businesses that are at least on a level playing field to attempt to provide some competition to these companies that I would argue, unfairly tipped the scales in the economic calculations in their favor. So that's what it's radical deregulation, radical abolition of taxes, right? Like I'm looking for taxes that we can not modify, not reduce. How can we eliminate these taxes and actually take that power away from the government and really restore that to the people, so that at least in one area of their life, and again, I'd get rid of as many taxes as I can possibly get rid of, but I think the grocery tax, the gas tax, those are ones that affect everybody, and I think would be kind of the top of the list. And I think that the actual impact of them is probably small enough that maybe that actually gets us that $1 billion in surplus. So it even becomes economically feasible from day one without austerity. But I think austerity at the government level is another thing that we need to do if we really want the economy to take off.
Well, to piggyback on that, we talk decentralized everything, and Shannon, something I know you know a lot about more than others is the entire crypto game. So not just pure crypto discussion, but where do you see potential opportunity to open North Carolina's economy up to things beyond just a constantly devalued dollar bill?
Excellent question. I would, in the back of my mind for a while, and had I won the primary, I would have put it on my stance here, though, is really for like possibly a North Carolina dollar that's gold based. Trying to get back to a gold standard or a meteor standard, right? that would work for me too. But being able to base our dollar on something that's physical, that's real, that's transferable, versus just thin air of just constantly printing money. That's where crypto does fairly well. It's completely decentralized. You can take your Bitcoin to Mexico and customs won't, you have to declare everything over $10,000, you go to jail. So they control that because of the drug market, but we necessarily shouldn't have a drug market anyway. And I'll probably talk about this in a few minutes, but I was watching an episode on Discovery last night, and they were talking about how the cartels are rarely sending marijuana across anymore. It had an 87% drop in the amount of marijuana coming into the United States. Why? Oh, because it's been legalized in so many places.
They're growing it here.
Yeah, you're growing it here, so it doesn't have to come in. So we could do that across the board, right? With all drugs, produce them here. The cartels won't be sending them, and then all of a sudden we're freeing up money all the way across the board. I mean, we got Homeland Security, and we got the border patrols, and we have all of that, and their only goal is looking for drugs that would stop if we remove the black market. I don't know if I got off on a tangent there, but those are
Very
just some
relevant
of the
though.
ways that we can, it helps our economy, because then we're no longer spending money on those things, and then we can kind of focus more on rehabilitation and things like that, as opposed to drug enforcement. Right? If a lot of people know that I spent a few days in jail over the over this candidacy, but I was able to talk to a lot of people and find out why they were in jail, what they actually did. And a lot of times people were just trying to survive, and they were slinging drugs, and I'm not supporting that, but sometimes they would get drugs in from Mexico that had fentanyl in it, and because it had fentanyl in it, and they were selling it not knowing it had fentanyl in it. Now a lot of them are looking at life sentences because the government wants to crack down on fentanyl. Well, if you legalize some of the other things that the fentanyl is coming in with, then you don't have to worry about them putting all of that in there. But it's hurting a lot of our drug laws are insane, and it's not helping anyone. We're locking up people for their entire lives over things that shouldn't necessarily be laws. So that hurts our economy, because now we're paying for these people's lifetime in jail. We're spending more money to keep them incarcerated. And oftentimes, if there are nonviolent crimes, they should be out trying to support their families, work a job, put them on home arrest. Let them go to work, take care of their families and stuff like that, and then not, isolate them and further drive them into a criminal way of thinking. I think we do more damage to our own citizens with our laws than anybody could actually do through any physical abuse.
You think about the economic impact of it, right? So it's not just when they're in jail, they get out, they've got a record that's attached to them. They're viewed as a violent felon because they sold more than some arbitrary amount of pot. They can't vote, they can't own a gun, they can't get a job, they go back to selling drugs, they get more and more desperate, they spend time in jail, they learn how to become a criminal because that's their way of life and they're not allowed to do anything else. And all because they smoked pot or sold pot. It's the most insane thing. And then get into the fentanyl thing. You want to get rid of fentanyl, make opioids legal. Make someone have to go to Walgreens or CVS and get opioids, because nobody's going to go and be like, hook me up with the fentanyl. Like,
Yeah.
and instead you create opportunities for them to get help. I mean, there are people that say the biggest argument I've heard back, if you legalize all drugs, is that it's not that people will start doing drugs. It's that you open up the broader communities, I guess, to sort of the means they will seek to get their drugs. So you're looking at more robberies, more violence. And my answer to that is you have that anyway.
Well,
If it's in communities,
we started with
communities can provide-
constitutional carry, though. I mean, that kind of
Well,
solves that.
and that was going to be my second thing is it would cut down on the incidents real fast. And if people are strapped, then maybe you take that turn into the clinic instead of into somebody's backyard. And that's a good thing. Somebody getting better is a good thing. Becoming a contributing member, becoming a better mom or dad, a better husband or wife, sibling, whatever it may be. Like, these are things that we should be driving, like incentivizing people to do better. And that makes the economy better. That makes us care about education. Education gets better. Just being more engaged in our lives instead of running around trying to catch up to mistakes that have been pinned to us because of some weird arbitrary law.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny as a libertarian, right? Because that's one of the things that, when the media was trying to interview me, like right before the primary, Shannon, remember when Fox Carolina interviewed us both, and they thought they had me with one of those gotchas. So you want to legalize all drugs, right? And a lot of people, I guess, haven't really, I would argue, haven't put much thought into it, like really analyze the economics of it. But just looking at pot, right? Like if we just look at pot, to me, that's the lowest hanging fruit in the drug war. Like, because at least from what I see, the evidence is the most dangerous thing about pot, right? The absolute most dangerous thing about pot is being caught by law enforcement with it. That's the single most dangerous thing about pot. It's not using it. It's not the gateway element. The most dangerous thing about marijuana is being caught in possession of it by an armed enforcer of the state. Like that, hands down, right? That's where you risk violence at the arrest. You spend time in jail, and that's the one thing that, you know, as a candidate, I have to kind of temper things sometimes, and you know, at least be open to some things. But the thing that bothers me about the drug war is the hypocrisy that I see in a lot of regular people, where they just don't seem to be intellectually consistent when it comes to that, where they're, you know, for example, just taking a look at an illegal substance and a legal substance in our state, right? We have cannabis, illegal in our state. And we have alcohol, not only legal in our state, only the state can sell it. Only the government can sell it, right? And the question of like, what is more dangerous, like to society, to people, like, I think it's pretty clear that alcohol is responsible for way more North Carolinians dying than pot. Like more North Carolinians have died from alcohol, like in the past month, than people have died from cannabis since the dawn of human history across the world, right? Like more people die in a month in North Carolina from alcohol than pot since the dawn of humanity across the globe. Yet the government sells one of those. And that's my big issue with a lot of people who are against the either the decriminalization or the legalization of marijuana, is like, if they wanted to ban alcohol, as bad of an idea as I think that is, like, I could at least look at them and take them seriously. Like, okay, you have some kind of guiding principle or logic or thought process that arrives, you know, that helps you to come to this conclusion. And maybe the input's different from the way I think, and that's okay. But when your position is so inconsistent, like, I don't want to be political about that. Like, I'm going to just tell you the truth. Like, the reality is alcohol is far more dangerous for human beings than cannabis is. On any level, at any fact or any statistic that you can possibly find, alcohol is more harmful than cannabis. And I guess, you know, if people are advocating for the criminalization of alcohol, I might be able to say, okay, at least I disagree with you, but at least you're principled or logically consistent. And the sad reality is that there's so many people who like want to ban pot and then come home and like drink a 6-pack after work. Right. And I'm like, hey, dude, drink your 6-pack. But if somebody wants to smoke some cannabis, leave them alone. Like, you have your vice, they have their vice. Hopefully we can all get to a place where none of us have any vices. Right. But it's just, to me, that's such an opportunity economically for our state too. We have a wonderful agricultural based economy that's still thriving in this state, and our farmers are being so held back, where if we took a radical deregulation approach to cannabis, North Carolina farmers could be some of the most successful farmers in this country. Yeah. Like even versus the states that legalize it, because I'm a big fan of full decrim. Right? Because legalization means that you have a whole tax infrastructure, at least the way, if the Republicans or Democrats are handling the legalization, it's going to have a huge tax structure designed to kind of steal from every one of those transactions as well.
Which doesn't decriminalize it, right? Because then if you're caught without weed that doesn't have a tax stamp, right?
Show us your weeds papers. Yeah, right. Show us your weeds papers.
If not, it's a crime. So they're not decriminalizing it. They're just trying to find ways to make money off of it, off of what people are already doing anyway.
Yep. And that, to me, that's one of the things that's like a low-hanging fruit. We could help our entire agriculture industry, right? When you look at things where, you know, like crop rotations, right? Just throwing in a hemp crop or a cannabis crop within there, it's something that could be a huge cash crop for our farmers. And when you look at what that does, right? Big picture economically, it's only good things for our state. Like it's only good things for our state if we end the drug war, especially the war on marijuana, right? Like it helps our farmers directly. It saves the taxpayer a ton in paying to enforce it, which I know is selective, and, you know, depending on some counties that you may live in, it's less of a problem.
Well, that's another point too, is a lot of drugs are illegal for people that can't afford a defense attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I still, well, let's not get there, but
That's
the
fair.
biggest case to defund the FBI is the FBI couldn't find out whose cocaine that was in the White House. Really?
Yeah.
All those cameras, all those cameras that likely exist in the White House, they couldn't figure out that was Hunter's cocaine.
I'm still trying to party with Hunter, so
I mean, hey, I bet you'd have a good time, Rob. I'm just
I'd
saying,
never forget,
we
or maybe
can't
wouldn't remember anything, but
this organization that takes how many billions of dollars every single year literally can't find out how a bag was dropped in a place that probably has more cameras per square inch than anywhere else
yeah,
on
on the
planet
planet.
Earth. And we can't figure out whose cocaine it was with that many billions. And that, to me, that just says, to me, that really tells me that those in power don't actually care about it. It's not like a principled thing that they're against. When they can look at it and be like, it's the president's son, let it go. Who cares, right? Let that go. But hey, that poor black kid, yeah, let's throw him in a cage for 20 years and like rent him out to that for-profit prison who's going to sell him out as slave labor for pennies on the dollars and enrich some corporation. Like that's going on across our country and across our state. And I don't know, man. I guess since I'm not a typical politician, I'm just gonna say the truth on these things, regardless of what it causes, good, bad. I'm gonna tell the truth. So
It does
well,
really
that's
come
a great
down.
point with within the legal system is that they are for profit, right? They have to make arrests. A lot of these cities have to make arrests in order for them to be able to pay their bills. And that shouldn't be the way our criminal justice system works. We should go after bad people. We shouldn't go after good people looking for tax revenue. And that's just, it's just insane.
yeah, I mean, well, and that's something that is problematic in all areas, right? Where I think through the whole situation of economic incentives, it's not just in that area, but like, look how it impacts homelessness. Right, where you look at and that's something that's near and dear to me here in Gastonia. But the way I found that this homeless situation works is all these cities do this thing called a pit count, right? It's a point in time count where they basically have, volunteers, people in the community who are like activists who are actually doing good work and care about the homeless and I think they're part of this part of the solution. But the problem is this pit count, the way it actually works from the government standpoint, right? Not from the eyes of the people or the homeless or anything else. But essentially, they do this pit count and they're like, hey, we have 400 homeless people. Well, they report that information to the federal government and the state government, and the amount of dollars that they get from the federal and state government to fight the problem is based on the pit count. Well, what does that mean? Like, if you strip away everything else and just look at the economic incentive structure that is set up, what that means is that the city governments get more money if there are more homeless people. So if I could just reach out to every North Carolina voter, if you follow my logic and you understand that more homeless people equals more money for politicians, I would just ask you, look at your county, your town, your city, right here in North Carolina. Do you think your politicians, your local politicians, want more money or less money? And if you think, based on what you think, not what I think, because I think these are, I think these greedy politicians want as much of our money as they can get. But if that's the case, to me, that shows you that the economic incentives do not align with them actually fixing homelessness in your community. It counts on them thriving, doing enough to make you think that they care about the problem and allow that problem to keep going so that they have more money to spend. And that to me is the same thing that we see in really anything that the government's trying to create money out of, right? The drug war, the war on homeless, like anything that you have these perverse economic alignments that do not align with the actual outcomes that society wants. If you were to ask democratically, and I'm not the biggest fan of mob rule, right? But can we at least have some common sense here and saying, hey, if the government is like, hey, we get federal and state dollars if we have more homeless people, maybe we should just question the economic incentives there. And when they do things like attack people who are trying to solve the homeless situation on their own, to me, that just provides further evidence of what it's really about. And I wish some local government would really prove me wrong. Like
We
I wish a local government would prove me wrong. That'd make me happy if they would. But sadly, wherever I look across the state, they all seem to operate the same way on this. And, you know, Gastonia's just worse than the others.
all that could have been solved if we're not even talking about all the money that we send around the world, but just with the money that we gave Ukraine, we could have solved homelessness in the United States. So that shows right there that, you know, they're not focused on helping the American people with the American taxpayer dollars. I don't really know what benefit we get out of helping the taxpayers, what benefit we get out of you know, sending our money to the Ukraine or Israel or
I don't know if we get any value on any of our tax dollars, Shannon.
Fair enough.
I mean, not any real value, not better value than we get that money in the free market.
But I could easily spend the money, you know, on education for my kids and get them a better education. And I don't even know where the rest of my tax dollars go.
Honestly, I would be so generous that if they would take my plan, right? I have a student for a few more years, right? We just finished up 7th grade. But if they gave me that $13,000 a year, I'd probably only use 3,000 of it. I'd be willing to commit to give that other 10,000 back to the government. Like, just implement my plan. And if I spend less than the 13,000, like, take the rest back, and I'll even accept that, because at least it's better than the status quo. Yeah.
It comes back to, I think, something you're both touching on without saying, but it comes back to property rights. Like, your stuff is your stuff. And
absolutely.
Tailing on the economic issues, one of the things that we hear about in North Carolina more than anything is quote unquote affordable housing. And I hate that term, because all housing is affordable to someone.
Yep.
But we have a distinct shortage in cheaper housing. I mean, housing's just skyrocketing, and you know, you have people encouraging local governments to block the building of more housing. And it's not all like, you know, they go, oh, we don't want these big condos and all this. Okay, I get that. I disagree with you. I tell you, you're wrong. But they want to block like luxury stuff too. And the fact is, if you build more luxury stuff, people with money move into that, and then everything moves down. It's just, we need more housing.
Yeah.
What can you two do to make this happen?
I mean, to me, that's an easy one, right? Like, to me, this is one of the easiest ones. And this is one that I've had a lot of, like, because this is a local issue for me, right? This is something that's going on right in Cramerton. There's someone who wants to build about 15 townhouses, probably about 150 feet from my house, right? In my neighborhood, my house will be closest to this new development. And there's a lot of people that are really resistant to this, and they're like, no, shut it down. And, you know, whether they succeed in shutting it down or not, I don't know. I'm just one dude. But the way I look at it, it should be really simple. If it's your property and you own it, you can do whatever the heck you want on it. Where I think the right of your neighbors comes in, right? And this is one thing that I think, again, you look at the status quo, we have a situation where our local and state governments are really tipping this thumb, putting their thumb on the scale economically, where they're not doing the things that are actually in the best interest of the communities. Because if you want to be a piece of property, and I don't care if you're in like the most rural neighborhood, and this is a hypothetical, unrealistic situation, but it demonstrates the principle, right? You have this rural community. Everybody's got like 5 acres. And if you want to build like a densely packed skyscraper, right, on this one little piece of land that's yours, I think that there's nothing the government should be able to do to tell you that you can't do that. Where I think it's fair is like, hey, you're about to put like 1,000 units on this property. If that's going to cause $1 million in cost for the infrastructure, right? To make it so that the water and the sewer and all of that is done, like, that developer should have to do that, right? It shouldn't be on, hey, I'm going to,
without a doubt.
And the challenge I see is that the developers with money, and again, maybe your communities are different. Shannon, I know you're kind of on the other side of the state. Rob, you're not too far away from me, about a half hour. But what I see a lot of is these big developers that do get their projects approved are really kind of screwing their neighbors in a lot of cases, because the things is they're like, they make enough campaign contributions to get the votes that they need to say yes, and then they just completely abandon things like water and sewer, and then, Everybody else is like, oh, our sewer lines are backing up, our water pressure's going down. To me, that's like the one role that if government is going to approve that, like it should be, hey, yeah, you could do whatever you want on your property, as long as you bear the cost of any costs it does to society, right? Like that's where it should be. And the sad reality is we have all of this NIMBYism. And I think that some of the basics that we could do to combat that, like, and again, I'm for getting rid of all of these regulations ideologically. But the biggest thing would be like right to build. Like there's so many people, at least in my communities, your parts of the state may be different, where it's like, hey, you know, I got a half-acre lot. I got my house on it, but you know, if I wanted to put a tiny house or two on my property, I have enough land to do it. Your local government won't let you do it. But if the government just pulled that away and said, hey, right to build on your own property, as long as you're not like straining the existing infrastructure. And if you're going to strain the existing infrastructure, you need to deal with it and not expect your neighbors to deal with it. But if you allowed everyone to do that, and like every retiree in this state could like take a portion of like their pension or their 401ks and put up a small, like a tiny house and rent that out to somebody, right? We could solve the homelessness crisis, the affordable housing crisis. We could solve all of that in a matter of like how quick it takes to build, to put up the initial batch of tiny houses that would come if we just said, hey, you can build on your own property. And that's where zoning ordinances look at it, where like this whole affordable housing, let me put it in, make sure to get those air quotes in, because you're right. All housing is affordable to somebody. Like to Bill Gates, every single piece of property on the planet is probably affordable, right? You know, to somebody who's a single mother on minimum wage with 3 kids, maybe not. But I'll tell you what, if you did away with zoning laws, let anybody do that, and the only requirement that was required of property owners is whatever impact you are going to have upon your neighbors as far as infrastructure, you have to bear that cost as opposed to us. I think we'd be able to solve the homelessness crisis, the affordable housing crisis, 6 months or less, just by getting the government out of it.
The same, because this is definitely what's going on in the whole Charlotte, Gastonia area. But is that what you see across the state?
Well, absolutely. But I mean, I think the whole property, you thinking that you own property is an absolute joke in this state. Well, in the country. I mean, I have a house and 2 cars that I haven't seen in 8 months.
You're still paying rent on them though.
Yeah. I still have to pay the mortgage. If not, then the bank will come and take it.
Oh, the mortgage and the rent. Wow.
Right.
So sorry, I joke
property
that
taxes on it.
I joke that property taxes are
and they
rent.
take that.
Yeah.
I mean, they are rent.
I mean, it is
100% rent.
You know,
it's the most evil tax. People are losing generational wealth. Retirees can't afford their homes because it's not just the property tax. Like there's some. So I very famously in the party love my HOA, but it's not a tax. It's a flat fee you pay every year. It requires a lot of the community to vote in favor of moving it up. It's not a bunch of money. The most evil thing about a property tax is that the county assessor who benefits from the money assigns your home a value. Yes. And then the council who benefits from the money determines what percentage of that value you are required to pay on some rolling basis. And it's crazy.
And artificially inflate the price of your home just so that they can make more tax dollars and then take your home from you.
I feel like every property tax valuation should be an automatic offer to buy. Like if you want to tax me on this, right? You say my home is worth X. Great. Is that a cash offer to buy this property for X? If it was, I'll tell you what, they would probably stop trying to value property because they would see how inadequately incompetent they are at actually doing that. And if they had to actually be an exit plan for anybody who wanted to kind of leave their municipality and they could be stuck with all of the real estate that was governed by their bad policies, I think it might actually work to hold them accountable. But I think the only way to really do anything fairly in that arena is to just seek to abolish it, right? Like abolish property taxes and switch to use fees, right? Like that's a scary solution for some people, right? But like we all buy insurance, right? Like we all buy insurance. Why not buy into local police and fire, right? Like why not buy into local, like it's there. And the sad reality, like this is something I've talked about where it seems like it's a societal shift that's happened more and more, you know, throughout my lifetime, but really going back 100, 120 years or so, all right, kind of turn of the century, we used to have this really big role where private solutions would actually work to deal with some of the challenges and suffering in society, right? Where if there was a widow who needed help, like communities used to be able to do that, whether it was churches, whether it was secular organizations, whether it was there were all these private organizations that sought to fix the societal and social needs. And then big government came and took over that role. And what happened is, I would argue they have essentially neutered, whether it was churches, whether it was nonprofits. Like, as soon as they took on that responsibility, there was almost like a monopoly on that service. And like charities and churches still kind of try to do some of it, but we see it, at least I've seen here in Gaston County, like if a church or someone who's trying to fix a societal problem without government permission, right? Like if they do that against the government's wishes, the government will stomp them out. And at that point, it becomes almost comical, right? Like the stuff in Gastonia that's launched my run in the first place, to me, it's almost comical, where you have, like, in a sad way, right? Like, I don't want to say it's comical where like, haha, laugh, but it's comical in the idea that we think that this is even like a rational or reasonable position, where you have a church who like is Christian, right? And forget all the different sects, denominations of all of that, right? At the end of the day, you have a church who is seeking to help the homeless, who's able to really stand and say, look, this is the book that defines my religion. And when I read in it, it says that my job is to help the needy, the orphans, the widows, like it lists, for the government to get in the way of that. And I would argue, at least looking at following the money, if you think follow the money, I think it's about government money. Like, that was the driving force behind that, because you had someone who's like, hey, if I have 150 people, whether they're in tents or in my basement or whatever, but I'm taking care of them and I'm making sure that they get meals every day and I'm making sure that they have warm shelter in the winter. If they go to do a pit count and now that 150 people is not counted because they have shelter, food, and their basic necessities meet, and now it's like, hey, that's $6 million less that local government gets. Boy, that's how you have a local government that's going to trample the First Amendment. That's going to trample, like as long as there's economic incentives. And sadly, this is, and I know that this is, Rob, I know you said you wanted to really kind of get in on policy, and I know we're kind of dipping very much into philosophy. At least I am with this one, but like philosophically, if the goal is to provide more prosperity, my opinion, when I look at things, is we have to look at the actions that we are taking. Are they creating prosperity or preventing prosperity? And in my opinion, if the government is looking at it and saying, hey, if we shut down this private individual who's trying to do something about a societal problem because it makes more money for us, and that's the only reason it makes more money for us, we are failing in that objective. And I think, sadly, everybody wants these local governments. They want to give raises to the people that work for there. They want to improve. Like, I'm not saying it comes from a place of evil or a place. It's just when you align economic incentives in a way that goes against fixing problems, you are not going to fix problems, period. Because fixing problems doesn't make economic sense when you look at it through the lens of government. And that's one of the things that I truly believe the only way to actually fix that, is to completely remove economic incentives.
But isn't it a law or whatever that was affecting that Gastonia church about the beds where they could support some people, but you couldn't supply them beds? Can you go into more?
Dude didn't care about that law for 3 years. And then Pastor Moses spoke out against the arrest of Joshua, and they showed up 3 days later. And here's why government, this is all you should need to know, because it happens all the time. There's another case exactly like this in Ohio, but this is why government never has your best interest. If they had come in and been like, look, these fire codes are here for a reason. We're really worried. We're not going to put people out on the streets. How can we work with you to like get this to the right place? Pastor Moses was trying to do that. Instead, they were like everyone out on the streets. There had been no one who had died from exposure in Gastonia for the prior 3 years. And something like 32 people died in the next 5 months. So they
I don't know.
murdered. They should,
I mean, there were some that died. Like, I mean, to say that there were none that died, I just don't think that that would actually.
from exposure specifically. I'm sure there were overdoses and stuff.
I'm sure there were even exposure deaths,
And
man. Because
also
as many people as Pastor
correlation
Moses was
doesn't
able to
prove
help.
causation. So I'm not implying that that was the cause of all of it.
No, but there's no
But you
question.
had something before, you had something different after. There's certainly some overlap there. But the government, they didn't even address the deaths. They had no other solution. They just said, we don't like this, and we don't care what happens afterwards.
Yeah, and that it ultimately comes down to basic logic, right? Like just ask anybody, like you, whoever you are, listening to this podcast, Libertarian, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whoever you are, if you find yourself listening to this podcast, right? Just ask yourself a basic question. Where are you better off? It's 19 degrees out in January, okay? Are you better off sleeping outside in a tent? Okay, that's option one. Or option two, in the basement of an old historical church built in the 1800s. It doesn't have a sprinkler system. It doesn't have a fire thing. And it only has like 1 or 2 viable exits. Not up to fire code at all, right? Where would you rather sleep? Where do you feel safer? Anybody who tells me that they'd rather sleep outside, I know is a hack or a liar. And sadly, 100% of the Gastonia City Council seem to support this idea that 100 people needed to be sleeping outside in tents because it's not a shelter at the church. To me, like that in its face is a joke. I'm sorry. Any of those 7 people on that council who thought this was the right plan, I challenge you, go outside when it's 17 degrees outside. Sleep outside for one night. And then think about the hundreds of citizens in your community that have to do that every night. And ask yourself why you're going to try and shut down a church that's actually trying to do something about that. But yeah, I've been fighting that fight for years, man. It is what it is. We'll see where that one goes. But I mean, that's the solution, and that's kind of the genesis here. But if we let NIMBYism, if we let mob rule overcome the Constitution, right? Like that's one of the things. A lot of people look at it for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, where, at least philosophically, it's designed to limit what government can do, right? Like what government can do for our rights. But when you think of the natural extension of that, at least if government's working properly and is designed, right? I don't care if 99% of the population wants to take my guns away. I don't care, right? Like the whole point of the Bill of Rights in the first place, all of these rights, the whole point was so that government couldn't do this, even if 99.9% of the population wants it, right? Like that's what it's for. If you're actually going to say that these are natural rights that we're going to acknowledge and enshrine, that our government can't do it, the people shouldn't be able to do it either. And I think that that's a lot of the problem in Gastonia. And I get it. It's working as someone who's been an activist in the homeless community. Like it's a nuanced and a difficult issue. It really is. And that there's a lot of considerations that, even through the lens of someone who thinks government is the solution, even though I disagree with them, like fundamentally to the core on principle, disagree with them. Like some of their concerns are true. Like some of their concerns are true. The question is, like, how do we align things where you don't apply what's situationally true and use that to drive policy that impacts a whole bunch of people where that assumption is not true, right? Like everyone's like, hey, every homeless person is a drug addict. I can tell you that's patently 100% false. 100%. I can tell you.
Certainly some deal with.
Yes, some are. Some are.
Either.
And like some are drug addicts to the point where their drug habit will cause them to steal, right? Like it'll cause them to violate other people's property rights, steal their property. And the way I see that is really simple. If they stole someone's property, hold them accountable. But like, don't lock up everybody who stands on the side of the road with like a sign, right? Like what is that doing to prevent somebody from being attacked, right? Like you have to understand that for all of these concerns, whether even for those people who think drug laws are legitimate, like even for those people, like we are, and I don't know how it is in where you are. You're up by Raleigh. It's a little bit maybe bluer by you, Shannon. So maybe it's not as bad. Again, at least if you believe what the uniparty fake halves tell you they believe in, which, you know, I argue they don't really believe in anything other than power and money. But if they would fix some of the core fundamental economic issues and respect property rights, these are solvable problems, guys. Like they really are solvable problems. And the solution is in many cases as simple as just tell the government to get the hell away from this. Like, as far away from it as possible. Forget what anybody wants. Defend and uphold the Constitution, and do it absolutely. Like, do it absolutely. That's the thing that bugs me about 2A. And you know, Shannon, I know, like, I didn't have a position on my planks on 2A. Anybody who asked me, I'm going to tell you the truth on my personal stances. But that's one of the things where, like, I think, even though it's not on my website, like, constitutional carry, that is something fundamentally that we need to get behind as libertarians, as North Carolinians, as Americans, as people who believe in the Constitution and liberty. We have to get behind that, because I've heard too many stories about situations, and the logic is too strong on the argument. That's the biggest thing that I have a problem with on the gun grabbers, is even if you accept every premise that they try to put out there as fact, and in many cases, you know, they put out things like high ammo stocks, and you're wondering, you know, what they're on and where you can get it. But like, you know, like you see all these things. Here's a fundamental reality. If someone is willing to murder or shoot another human being, there's absolutely nothing you can write down on paper and have some human beings agree to that can stop that. The only human beings who will listen to what you write down on paper and have human beings agree to are people that you have no reason to take guns away from.
Yeah.
That's factually accurate.
100%.
And we see that, and we have this weird scenario where, like, you can be drafted by the government to go fight in Ukraine or the Middle East or anywhere else on planet Earth that we decide that we want boots on the ground. You can be drafted against your will into conscription, which I would argue is quite obviously slavery. Right? Like, it's quite obviously slavery. But you can't drink any of this alcohol that only the government can sell. And you can't buy this firearm despite a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. And I just don't understand how we've gotten to a point in 2024 where this is even a conversation. And it's sad to almost like shut out opposition to that. But on principle, right? Like I talked to someone, you know, I'm blessed that I have a son, right? So one of those things that I guess I have to worry about less than those of, you know, than others who may have daughters, right? Like, you hear it. There was a whole movement around it years back, but we regularly hear that college campuses are a violent place where rape culture exists, where women are subject to sexual violence. Yet in this place, the law says women who, you know, try not to delve into some of these, but like, who are at least biologically at a disadvantage in many cases when it comes to physical interaction, right? Like, and I can say, Rob, your wife's feisty. She might be able to beat you up, but at least if it came to like physical strength and raw things and not other things, I think the idea that like a big man and a small woman, like a firearm in many cases is the only thing that can equalize that and provide protection. Yet we have 18-year-old women, right, who are sent off to colleges that half of the uniparty wants to say is one of the places where they are likely to be violently sexually assaulted. Yet that same party's policy position is, hell no, there's no way under any circumstances we're going to allow this 18-year-old to protect them, even in this place that we tell you is the most likely place that they will encounter sexual violence. To me, that is fundamentally broken. And the only way to do that is to radically go into constitutional carry. Like I advocated for House Bill 189 with grassroots, even though I think it's a weak constitutional carry bill. Like I do. And, you know, I'll tell Paul Vallone that. I'll tell anybody else. This is one of the weakest constitutional carry bills I've seen.
I agree.
But it's better than no constitutional carry bill, right? Like if I could if I could envision the perfect constitutional carry bill, it would be a sentence. One sentence in plain English. The Constitution exists and we understand the Second Amendment is for real. I guess it's going to be two sentences. We will adhere to the Constitution on this issue. That's all it should be. Like
That's it. Yeah, 100%.
That is all our constitutional carry bill.
You also realize that we're one of the places where I believe it's 7 nuclear weapons that the U.S. military has lost over the decades. One is in some field in North Carolina. A bomber went down with 2. We found one. We never found the other.
Yeah.
But like you can't carry.
It's probably disarmed though.
Well, you can breathe a sigh of relief. They think it's disarmed because it didn't go off. Like that was their explanation. Like, well, if it wasn't disarmed, it probably would have exploded. Essentially, it's a crazy story. Check out Potter Field.
Yeah, it's wild.
Well, Shannon, I know that you're a big. Again, we started the conversation off with your tweet about constitutional carry being a top priority, and I'm sure you have daughters. It's something you think about too. I know my daughter has learned to shoot. I don't think we got too far into philosophy. Sometimes you have to explain the philosophy to understand your all's policy, because get government out of it. People are like, so you don't want to do anything about it? And we're like, no, we really want to do something about it. That's why we want to get government out of it. Even like Shannon, you mentioned Ukraine and Israel. So if I thought we were giving money to those other countries to defend their democracy and freedom for real, I wouldn't love it, but I'd shut up about it. Like there's other things that would bother me more. But we don't want Ukraine's war to end. Raytheon doesn't want Ukraine's war to end. They want more war prolonged as long as possible so they could just keep raking in the dividends, because the money that goes to Ukraine goes straight back to our defense contractors. I think that's kind of the nature of government. And so the last topic I want to talk to you all about, and in particular, like Republicans just passed this bill last session. I forget the exact nature of it, but essentially they can hide whatever they want. They can label documents as sensitive and then destroy them. There's no public accountability. They had a supermajority that didn't pass constitutional carry. You're getting a lot of pushback. You saw some shenanigans, which were admittedly funny, but I don't know if you saw, I think it was Berger who sent the junior Democrat into like the basement for his new office or something. Now, if that was all the like government hijinks we had to deal with, I could pay attention to that and laugh, but we have to deal with that while our rights are being trampled on. And then we have a whole bunch of North Carolina representatives in federal Congress voting for this warrantless FISA bill. So what can you all do to make, because look, the fact is, let's say you win and we win all 60 races that we have people in. Even if we had a fully libertarian government, it would take some time to unwind. And I've argued many times it would be irresponsible to unwind immediately. So how do you unwind successfully, putting government transparency first so people know what's going on, they feel comfortable that?
Well, I'm a blockchain advocate, and that doesn't just encompass cryptocurrencies, right? It is a technology that is wide open. It is completely transparent. And we can easily put documents and voting and, your high school diploma, all of that can be included on a blockchain, NFTs. All of our government should be on a blockchain to where we have full transparency. We shouldn't be able to hide anything, classify it, or hide anything away from the American people. So ideally, we would work on systems that would help encourage that transparency. And that's not something you can just do overnight. And as you said, I mean, there's a lot of things that I completely hate about the state, but we can't just go in and day one and stop it. We have to slowly devolve them very much like they evolved to begin with. And government transparency is something that I think that we can actually attack at a grander scale, with but blockchain just wouldn't necessarily solve this, because they're going out of their way to hide it. That to me just kind of shows how shady their motives are, right? If you don't want the American people who voted for you to see the documentation on why you're making certain decisions, or the decisions that you've actually made, that is an inherent problem.
Yeah. I mean, I know what I would do, right? So and my position is a little different than Shannon's, right? Assuming we both win, we've got a governor and lieutenant governor. One thing I know is, with Shannon's background, I would very quickly appoint him to try to move all of our record keeping to blockchain, whether we have to set up our own chain from the get-go. And again, not looking at from a standpoint of like Bitcoin being on the blockchain with a central, with a decentralized ledger, but looking at it from like a record standpoint, and open information that is permanently written in a specific place. I think, Shannon, I know you'd have the responsibilities of lieutenant governor. I'd want you leading on this front too. But I think that a big thing that I would look to do as governor, and again, I've said this on other podcasts, on other scenarios, where if somehow enough North Carolinians check a box next to my name, and again, I think the number would come in like 2.5 million or so is what it would take, where they elect me, I think I would actually follow the lead of someone who I met. Sorry, you can't see it, but it's actually a Democrat senator in our state, Senator Greg Meyer. So coming out of Gastonia, I went to an event that Libertarians actually submitted Joshua Aurora for, and it was the Sunshine Awards, right? And the idea is sunlight's the best disinfectant, right? So they look to honor someone who was a private citizen who fought for transparency in government. And Greg Meyer was actually one of the people who spoke up, who's a sitting senator in our state. And he got up there and talked about that exact issue, Rob, about how the GOP supermajority rammed through essentially in the budget, right? Like in the budget that says, hey, approve this or the government stops running. They included, and apparently the way they did it was kind of shady too, where they like snuck it in last minute, where they essentially said that like our legislators are the ultimate arbiters on whether their documents are classified or not, right? Like, and if you can imagine, just like, hey, you're in the government, you work for the government of North Carolina as a legislator, and you're working through all these things, your negotiations, the things with lobbyists, all this stuff. And they say that you are the one who ultimately decides whether your own information is subject to the public. Like, if you're an honest person, I think you would look at it and be like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have that power. That doesn't seem like that's in the best interest of the people. And one of the things that Greg Meyer did that won him, the Sunshine Award, not only presents to a citizen and to a journalist, but they present to somebody in government who's fighting for transparency. And one of the things that he said is, like, on the earliest date that he was allowed, he was going to take all of his files, every single one of his files from his whole term, and he was going to release that. To me, like that is something that I would, if elected, I said I was going to be a thorn in the side of the federal government. And there's no question, if enough North Carolinians check the box next to my name, they're going to come after me. They're going to come after me with everything they can. The question is, how much can I get away with before they come after me? And one of the things that I would do is, like, if I could get access to that as governor, and release the files for everybody in our state government, everybody, I would release it outright. I would just release it. And if you want to come after me and impeach me, if you want to sue me, if you want to sick the AG on me, I don't care, right? Like, when you think of what it means if a libertarian is elected, like, we need to get in there and do what the people will have elected us to do, and that is radically transform the government in a people first way, and undoing what I would argue are the just blatantly illogical and immoral decisions that the government has done in allowing the representatives to essentially classify their own documents. is something that I would do out the gate. Is put that out there, make them challenge it, and then go into court and defend why they think the people of North Carolina have no right to know what their own elected representatives are doing. And if that's something, and you want to put me out there and put me before the firing squad, I'll stand on that and I'll die on that hill for the people of North Carolina, because I know damn well that you, the voter of North Carolina, can look at this on its face and say, of course our government officials should be accountable. Of course they shouldn't be able to hide what they're doing from me, the person who's electing them.
That's not national security, right? Our classification systems for national security. They are something that should absolutely be classified. But why a particular legislature or whatever decided or what they did, that has nothing to do with national security. If China found out what this person did, it doesn't affect us whatsoever.
It's a shame. Republicans should be ashamed of themselves. Truly. And I hate to say this, every single Republican who works for the government of North Carolina in the House or the Senate that voted for this, you should be ashamed of yourself. You failed the people of North Carolina. You have dishonored the Constitution of our state and our country, and you should resign if you have any integrity as a human being. I know you won't, but if I get in there, I will declassify your documents, because, again, you are an embarrassment and a stain on what this state, this community, and this government is, if you think that is in any way justifiable. If you have a legitimate reason to classify something for national security reasons or for whatever, maybe make that case. But a blanket policy that you are the arbiter of your own documents, you should be ashamed of yourself for voting on some un-American nonsense, as should everybody in the House of Representatives and the Senate, who have said that they should be, that the federal government should be able to spy on Americans without a warrant. You are, again, let me temper myself. I don't want my team to get mad for saying the truth about this one, and being too radical. But you know what? I don't care. I'm going to tell you the truth. If you voted for any of this, you're a traitor to the Constitution. You're a traitor to this country. And people will get mad at me for saying that. But if you voted that the federal government should be able to spy on Americans without a warrant, you're a traitor to the American people. You're a traitor. Sorry. If that's too radical for you, don't vote for me. But if you think that the Fourth Amendment and the Bill of Rights matters and that the government should adhere to the Constitution, I'm the only candidate in this state running for governor that actually believes that.
Well, so that's actually a very good note. So I want to get you all back on. There's still a whole lot of policies to discuss. I know you both have lots to talk about, more on drug legalization, public safety, occupational license, like so many things to get into, but I want to be conscious of time. So I will throw up both of your socials up on the screen and in the comments if you all want to take me through where people can find and follow, how they can help, how they can donate, and give a quick little 30-second outro pitch for why we should vote for you. Shannon, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I mean, you can find more about me on shannonbray.us. To be honest with you, you can donate to me or Mike. My campaign's in lockstep with his. My campaign will be in lockstep with his. And it's an honor for me to be a candidate as lieutenant governor with Mike running as governor. But I'm more active on Twitter, so you can find me there at Shannon Bray NC. But yeah, other than that, we'll just be kind of traveling the state, probably separate, as we live on different sides of the state. Kind of helps us kind of canvas things out. But on the important issues, you'll most likely see us both together. But yeah, I'm happy if you support me, support Mike, just anything you can do to support, our libertarian ticket in general, would honor me greatly.
Awesome. Yeah. So for all you listening or watching, I'm Mike Ross. I'm the Libertarian candidate for North Carolina governor. You can find more about me and my platform over at firetheuniparty.com. But I want to make a specific request, and I'm going to go out there, and I hate asking for money, because honestly, the reality is I believe that your money would be better spent on something that you would rather spend it on, or a local charity in your community, or anything other than this, because money in politics is a cancer. But if you like these ideas, if you like freedom, if you like liberty, if you believe that we need to reduce the size, scope, and power of government, I need your help. That's a sad reality. Spectrum News, who's the one who's going to be putting on the debate, sent me what I would say is arbitrary, unnecessary, and quite frankly, against the goals of my own campaign to raise $1 million by June 30th in order to be able to participate in the debates. And here's what I can tell you. Those debates, if I am not on the stage, is going to be nothing but the uniparty going through canned talking points, blowing smoke up your ass. I'm sorry. That's what's going to happen. If you want someone to push back against that, please head over to firetheuniparty.com. Make any donation you can. $1 helps. $6,400 if you got it helps a lot. But if we raise that $1 million and can be on the debate stage, I will make sure that all of these issues, your money, your wallet, your freedoms, your liberty, your choices, and being an advocate for you will be something that's spoken about. If I don't raise that $1 million, they will shut me out the debate because they do not want libertarians to have a voice. They just want the uniparty to divide you against your neighbors so that they keep power and that their donors can keep making money. So head on over to firetheuniparty.com. And if you got it, please donate. I promise to be a good steward of it, use it in a fiscally responsible way to reach as many people as possible. And if there's any money left over, my plan is to give it to charity and make some real good in the world. firetheuniparty.com. Please head over there and help out if you can.
Thank you both very much. I'm personally very excited for this race. I feel like I don't even know the last time we had a governor and lieutenant governor candidate, but we got two real strong candidates.
Don't forget Bob Drack over at State of Order. We got a lot of we got a lot of council of state positions going now.
But I'm excited to get this out there. You're just good on your feet. You're good in front of people. You're good combating the narratives that the machine wants to put out. So I love seeing you up there. Pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate both your time. Everyone listening, you heard him. Go give some money. Ask to volunteer. We need it. We're fighting against something more massive than we can really comprehend. But the power lies with us.
Yeah.
So thank you both very much. Looking forward to next time.
Thank you all for having me.
Thanks.
Hey, everybody! It's Groo and Dub. We hope everybody's doing okay. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
And we are excited to be back on. This is the best portion of the Liberty Inc. podcast. Thank you for sticking around. It's been a couple weeks, but here we are, and we have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
And I say we start right away talking about the Canes upset loss to New York Rangers. I'm still blown away. I don't know how in the world they let a 3-1 lead go with 10 minutes left in the third period with so much on the line, so much to lose, and they gave it up here in Raleigh. I am a little upset. How are you feeling?
Well, and I'll say it before, and I'll say it again. 2 words. Frederick Anderson.
I agree.
And my thing is, if that man
he bet against his own team and lost on purpose so that he could cash out on his winnings. What do you think about that?
If that man is on the roster November 1st, 2024, Don Waddell and the entire front office should be fired immediately.
You sound a little upset as well.
Here's the thing, and this might sound cynical, and I went and looked on Hockey Reference to make sure I didn't misremember something. That man did have 3 shutouts this year. You got to remember, he's about 2/3 of the season behind.
Right.
And now he's starting to get into the mid-season portion of the program while everybody else is in playoff mode. He's entering, you have that honeymoon period, like right after training camp and stuff, when you're feeling good and you're well rested and you haven't done stuff. And yes, I know he went through that blood clot ordeal. I don't wish that on anybody. But something I've noticed him doing later in the season and into these playoffs, and this is not a knock against him, but he was known for it. I don't care how big of a lead he had. He could have a 5-1 lead or 8-0. It could be 8-0, and he would just give up a weird, stupid, softy goal. And of course, in those types of games, it doesn't matter what difference is 8-1 or 8-2. But when these games are being decided by a goal or less, you can't give up weird, softy goals or fall down into creeps.
A hat trick, to say the least, an uncontested, unanswered for hat trick.
Yeah, and to give it up in a period.
10 minutes.
Yeah, half of a period.
4 goals in 10 minutes.
They basically New York Islandered us.
Yeah.
And yes, what it was better goaltending because Shesterkin, I got to give the man credit. He stood on his head in the series. I got to give credit to their power play, which stepped up when they needed to step up, because our power play once again dooms us in the playoffs.
That's for sure.
And here's the thing, and I will say it on this podcast if nobody else will say it. Unfortunately, the Hurricanes and their current construction are no better than the Marvin Lewis Cincinnati Bengals. And I know that if you know, you know. That was a team that would consistently perform well in the regular season and then lose in the first or second round of the playoffs. Never even make a conference championship, much less the Super Bowl. And they had good teams. They had good quarterbacks. They had decent defenses. And I hate to say it. I'm not saying Rod Brind'Amore's a bad coach. But you notice some of the assistants he has were holdovers or good old boys from other regimes. And he may need to look elsewhere because, brother, it ain't working.
Right.
A team like that with deep defense, and yes, we missed Pesci, we missed Jesper Fast, but if we're so deep, then why did they take Burns off the power play? And then all of a sudden, oh my God, we score 2 or 3 times now on the power play. Too little, too late. Why wasn't this done earlier in the series? That's my question.
We need to spend money on a goalie. I feel the rest of the team is holding up their own. I feel like we need to spend $10 million on a goalie, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, if anything was consistent about those previous teams, those few and far between teams that made playoffs and made runs, what was the key? It was a goalie who could stand on their head when they needed to. That's why Cam Ward was the only goalie in Hurricane history to win 300 games.
I met that guy last year during the playoffs.
You met him? That's a great story. And I'm so happy for him.
This hat right here, actually, one of these.
Oh my God.
Signed by Cam Ward. I don't know exactly where it's at.
Who all you got on there?
It's got some old schoolers, man. I can't even
tell.
A Cam is on here though. I just passed it around and they all signed.
I'm just glad you don't wear that hat.
I do wear it. I do. Yeah.
Well, just be careful. It is a Fanatics hat.
What's wrong with that?
Well, you do know they're a little spat with Major League Baseball right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
and you want to know what's funny? They're the only betting company I don't use. I use every other legal betting company in the state of North Carolina except for Fanatics. And that is the reason why. If they're that bad with uniforms, and speaking of uniforms, especially in hockey, if you want to get a decent uniform. Get your Adidas's now, because beginning after July 1st, all jerseys will be made by Fanatics.
Yeah.
Because that's the new contract.
So you saw the F on the side, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have a favorite to win the Stanley Cup now? Because I have mine. So
I don't
what
have
about you, man, with
I
the
don't have a
Kings?
favorite, but it's not New York.
No, it
No,
cannot
I
be
know
New
there's
York.
some
When you
people
said
out
New
there. It's
York,
like, well, I
I
want
was
the team to
about to
beat us to
freaking come
win so
over
we can
there
say we lost to the
whoop
champions. I'm
your
like,
butt.
no, I don't want that satisfaction from them.
No.
I subscribe to the notion that I do this in other sports too. If the North Carolina team that I'm rooting for is out, I will root for somebody who has never won it.
Oh.
And right now, those teams right now are Florida and Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only two left that have never won a Stanley Cup.
I think the Canucks will win tonight. I really do.
I really hope they beat Edmonton. And the thing is, I know, everybody's like, McDavid's got to get his. I'm like, not necessarily. There's plenty of good hockey players that never won one.
Right. Burns is
There's
one
Hall
of
of
them.
Famers that never won cups. What are you talking about? I mean, look at all the Hall of Famers that all over the years that have played for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Never won a cup, but they're in the Hall of Fame.
I tell you what, I'd like to see, you're going to be shocked by this, but I would like to see the Dallas Stars win. I really would.
Well, that would go against my thing because they won in '99.
Right. That's going against your thing. But
yeah, but
I'd
they
like to
have a good
see. I'm
team.
from Dallas, and so I just
I can see the connections there. I have nothing wrong with that, but like I said, there are hurricane connections with Florida.
Yeah.
And those young kids up there in Vancouver, it would be nice if they won it for that city.
Yep.
It was so close, and it actually had a 3-2 lead on Boston coming home and got away a series.
Yeah.
And the riots in Vancouver because they lost. And it would just mean not only as much for Vancouver, but it would probably be a cathartic release for the country of Canada.
Yeah.
After not seeing a Canadian team win it since 1993.
I'd also like to see the Dallas Mavericks win at this point.
Now, this is something I could get behind, and we're switching to basketball a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit, but I'd like to see the Mavericks.
But here's the thing. Would you like to see a Western final between the two Slavic competitors, Jokic and Doncic? That would be an amazing Western final.
Right.
I think that would be one that would go 7, and I think it would just be a great basketball series. And then, of course, tonight we get to see if New York gets to join Boston in the East. Because they get to play Indiana in Game 6 there. That's a really weird series because Indiana beat New York to tie the series at 2 by 30 points, and then they go to New York and get beat by 30 for New York to have a 3-2 lead. I mean, that's a 30-point swing both ways, and it's like, gosh, it's a weird series. But I'm sure Boston, who's already moved on and is well rested, they're not going to mind if they go, to a 7th game, because basketball is one of those sports. It's like rest actually helps you. And I know some people say rest versus rust, but, especially with a team like Boston that's hurting with Porzingis being out and having to get him back. And, he tried his best to play in the second round, but he just couldn't do it. He just needed more time to rest. This is a boon for them to just heal and be fully 100%.
Now, speaking of sports betting, do you have any You have any bets on any of these games, or were you betting? You have to tell me the truth. Did you bet?
Yeah, I have to tell you the
against?
truth.
No,
Up
you got to tell me the truth on
until
this. Did you
honest to
bet?
God,
Did you bet against
honest,
the Canes?
I did not. I will never. Now I will tell you this right now. I don't care what the odds are. I will never bet against
I have a friend
anybody
who's a
who is
Canes
playing for.
fan who bet against the Canes on the first New York game, and they won, and so he won some money. But he calls himself a Canes fan. Can you believe that?
No, I can't. I cannot rightfully root or bet against any of my teams. I've lost
Yeah.
money. You realize how much money I've lost just betting a $5 on the Rockies this year in vain?
Colorado Rockies?
Yes, the Colorado
Is
Rockies
that your
baseball
team?
team. A team for the first 31 games of this season. They're on a heater right now, but here's what's a funny thing. The last Hurricanes game I bet on was game 3. And then I didn't bet on any game 4, and they won. I didn't bet on game 5, and they won. I almost bet on game 6. And here's the thing on DraftKings, they had this thing for the playoffs. If your team goes up by 2, you win even if the team loses.
Wow.
Yeah, and if I had gotten in on that, I would have cashed some money out. And I know people who did that and they cashed out, and I'm happy for them. But all in all, I would rather see the Canes move on than I win money.
Yeah.
You know,
that building had to be a very depressing place that night.
Oh, I mean, I saw pics from some of our constituency who went to the game, notably our chair and our secretary. And, they were both sitting way up high. I know one of them was sitting behind the state championship banners. That's how high they were. I'm not even joking. And, but all in all, playoff games are a different breed. I will say that. And, I believe that, I think we've been fortunate to go to the playoffs for these last 6 years under the Brindamore regime. And I mean, there are real people saying, do we need a change of scenery?
Wow.
I'm just playing the devil's advocate. I'm not advocating that they get rid of Rod Brindamore or let him walk to another team, because, there are very juicy opportunities out there right now.
Right.
Because there was that rumor of Brindamore to Seattle. There's rumors, I'm not even joking about this one, Brindamore to Toronto.
Wow.
Because remember, Toronto fired their coach.
Mm-hmm.
And before we move any further, do you remember the last time in this space when I said there is smoke and fire about the Arizona Coyotes moving to Utah?
Yeah, I do remember that.
And guess what happened?
It happened. Tell me it happened.
And now I'm not trying to manifest anything this time. But all I got to say is beware of the smoke.
Well, you also rang the alarm about an MLB team coming to Raleigh. Have you heard anything new about that? And remind me again of what the name was that they were tossing around, the idea for the name.
Well, all I know is Dundon is trying to headline this, and I know for a fact he and the people that are behind MLB Raleigh have gotten together. They've came out with some interesting, let's just say interesting merchandise of an NC cap, not an R cap, but an NC cap, meaning that this team is going to be called either the North Carolina or Carolina somethings. I don't know what the something is.
What was the team name again?
Well, my favorite names were the North Carolina or Raleigh Oaks.
Nice.
I've also heard that some of them it could be, the Raleigh Capitals, named after the old minor league ball team. But I'm not sure how the people would respond to that, because it would be spelled the same as a certain team out of the DC region in hockey. And
yeah,
I don't know if
not
people
a
would be
fan.
open to that. I know there are people that are questioning it because they'd be so close to the Durham Bulls, but the Durham Bulls would be their AAA team, because if you look out, there's a precedent. You look out there in Seattle, who's
Would
the
they
AAA
change
team?
that
The
from the
Tacoma
Tampa Bay
Rainiers.
Rays? How would that change? How would that change?
Right now they're the Tampa Rays, but I mean, agreements can be made.
Oh.
But I would say the one that makes the most sense would be your AAA team would be the Durham Bulls. And if it wasn't, of course, it would be, the Charlotte Knights. And also, Tom Dundon has said if he can't get anything secured in Raleigh, he would look to Charlotte to build the ballpark. He hasn't been silent about that either. But he wants a team for North Carolina. That's for certain.
Yeah.
Because that's the market.
Okay.
And
that's
and
good.
I don't know if we've discussed on this forum, but
that's fantastic.
But Major League Baseball has tried to come to North Carolina before via movement.
Yeah.
And like I say, I just remember that time. I was probably mid-teen to late teenager when Kernersville had the vote. And they voted it down handily, 60-40. No money for the ballpark, because they would have built it in Kernersville. I think the team would have been either the Carolina Triplets or the something Triplets, since it would have been the Twins moving to North Carolina. And I just think, they're doing their due diligence this time. And I just am excited to see what's coming about. But,
when are you going to grow your mustache back, bro?
You won't see it again until sometime during the fall.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. This is heat time. This is hot time. This is all about comfort.
You need to grow that thing back, man. That thing was on point.
I know everybody loved it, but it's summertime now. That's why I don't have anything up here.
Right.
So you just got to get used to it.
On a side note, are you doing okay, man? Are you? What's new with you?
Well, nothing much. Everything's still going good.
Working a lot.
Great. At work. Wait, and I don't know what's going on in there, but something is going on.
Nuts?
Yeah, I don't know what the cats are doing.
Cat Daddy, bring them cats in here, Cat Daddy.
Hold on.
You go get one?
Yeah.
Oh,
let me see what's
we
going
need to let
on.
our audience meet your cats.
Yeah, hold on. Let me go see if one of them will come to me. Stand by, everyone.
I like that. We get to meet Cat Daddy's cats. And now you'll know why his nickname is the real Cat Daddy. For real. And I'm excited that you all get to meet Cat Daddy's friends.
Well, they're not feeling it tonight. That's for sure.
What do you mean?
Oh, they're in there playing, and they didn't want to have nothing to do with me. And, cats have their own personalities. So
you
I'm gonna
gotta go be the boss.
I'm gonna let them. I mean, they were in there trying to be a little aggressive with each other, and I'm like, hey, cut that out. Don't want to
You
get
gotta
too
be the cat
wound up.
daddy and go in there and tell them what to do.
Well, I'm not gonna hurt my babies. You know that.
I didn't say hurt them.
No, I'm not saying that either, but you know how it is. But anyway, let's get back to something else. Speaking of heaters, let's go a little bit to the south and talk about Charlotte FC. They've gone on a little bit of a streak themselves, and they have vaulted to 5th in the Eastern Conference.
Yes.
After a couple of wins, this time over the Red Bulls of New York. And, I know it's very early in the season and playoff standings mean nothing, but, Dean Smith has done magic and wonders with this club. And, it's such a world of difference than what it was last year when you had a coach who I won't mention that was happy with draws and happy with defensive shape, but you still gave up 2 goals. What's going on? And we have a coach that understands football, understands this culture, understands, how you're supposed to conduct yourselves on the pitch. And it's just good to have a team that's competitive in games and can battle back in games. And that's what I like about Dean Smith. And
now we keep talking about
he is not going to become more beloved than the Dean Smith that we know. But, there'll be a little room for the English version of Dean Smith.
We keep talking about going to a game and broadcasting live. I think we really, really need to try to do that.
Oh, yeah, that would be interesting. But the thing is, I think we would have to set up something like a GoPro or a camera on ourselves. Because you know how...
Well, maybe we could pre-record it there. We could do that.
But you know how Roger Goodell et al. Are with their intellectual property? We could broadcast there and
we could pre-record it. We won't necessarily go live, but
yeah, we could do that.
We could record an episode in Charlotte.
Yeah, that would be fun. We could do it.
You let me know. If we can.
Here's the thing. I want to know something. Do you know who or what the Roaring Ride is?
The what?
That tells me you don't.
I didn't hear what you said. What?
Oh, do you know who or what the Roaring Ride is?
Roaring Ride?
Riot. R-I-O-T.
No, I don't. Tell me.
The Roaring Ride is the official, unofficial fan group of the Carolina Panthers, and I am a member.
Roaring Riot?
Yes, Roaring. O-R-O-A-R-I-N-G. Roaring Riot.
When did this come about?
Well, it was founded on or around 2015 by these 2 men who wanted to create a soccer-like culture for American football.
Okay.
And my good sir, you should see the tailgates these 2 men put on, or it has grown to.
Who are these 2 men?
Well, it's Josh Stein and Zach Luttrell. And they are 2 self-avowed Panther fanatics themselves.
Josh Stein, our current lieutenant governor? Oh no!
No! Not
lieutenant
that
governor.
one.
Yes, he is a lieutenant governor. Our current lieutenant governor.
He's an attorney general, but
attorney
not that
general. Okay, that guy.
And anyway, those 2 gentlemen are the ones behind it. Zach the most. Zach has been great. When I lived in Alaska, I flew down after paying the fee there was a get-together called Cruise with Cam. And I went on a little excursion on Lake Norman, and Cam Newton came on the boat with us. This was when he was rehabbing his ankle, and he could have been no more of a gracious person and down to earth person. And he's a great human being, and I got more respect for him after meeting him myself. And a lot of the
I've always liked Cam.
Is unfounded on that man. And the stuff he does to give back.
Yeah.
And for him to get jumped like he did, he had a right to defend himself. And I will always be on that man's side. And yes, he said he was in the wrong for doing what he did. But my God, he was taking those men to town. And I applaud him for that. And, and he's right. He was unarmed, but they could have pulled a weapon on him at any time. And they thankfully didn't. But, I will always defend that man, and that man deserves to go in the Hall of Honor when it is his time to come. But he has not been retired for 5 years yet, and he is not officially retired from the National Football League. He hasn't sent in his paperwork.
Yeah.
So that clock cannot start until he sends in his paperwork. But the way he talks on his podcast, it sounds like he's retired from the National Football League. But
yeah,
like I say, you never know.
Burned a few bridges along the way, or got set up to burn the bridges. But anyway, man, we're pushing it for time. So let's wrap it up. Is there any closing statements you would like to make, Cat Daddy?
Before we leave, I will just mention the Charlotte Hornets got the 6th pick in the draft. They didn't move up. They didn't move down. They stayed right where they are. And this is an unassuming draft because I'm not well versed in who or what are the top picks. And whoever they pick, I will support unwaveringly unless they are no good when they come into the league. But so far, so good. Brandon Miller was the right choice last year, and he has proven his worth. And I'm very bullish on the Hornets this coming season.
Cool, man.
Yes. And also, I want to give a great thanks to everybody. Unfortunately, due to the situation with my mother, I'm not going to be able to go to the Libertarian convention as I had previously planned to. And I tendered my resignation as a delegate. But I, in no means, am I not supporting the Liberty candidates. But also I want to thank everybody in and out of the movement and the party for all the prayers and well wishes for my mother right now, who is going through chemo. The good news is she has been cut back on her chemo. It is fighting the disease well.
Good, man.
And we hope to continue this positive movement going forward. But I want to give everybody my thanks for their well wishes and their prayers and their thoughts. So I appreciate y'all.
Thank you for that. Thanks for the update. And keep Cat Daddy's mom in prayer. And we thank you for sticking around to
Yes, we love y'all too.
The very best part of this podcast. And thank you for sticking with us through all these seasons. We really appreciate it. And until next time, this is Dub and Groo signing out. We will see you next time. Thank you very much.
Cats are like that.
So we came back on real quick, everyone, because Cat Daddy's kids just came in the room and we needed to get this. So
she's leaving. No, she heard it. She's heard it.
Oh, your cat's camera shy. Okay, well, never mind, folks. We tried. Okay.
Yeah.